Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. In 1978, Arthur Blank and his business partner, Bernie Marcus, were fired from the hardware store chain Handy Dandy in an internal power struggle. Within a year, they co-founded the Home Depot, a little business success story that maybe you've heard of. Arthur joins me today to talk about his new book, Good Company, and a whole lot of other stuff. In our conversation, he shares the powerful principles that have defined his success. Number 1, put people first. 2, listen and respond. Number 3, include everyone. 4, lead by example. Number 5, innovate continuously. And 6, give back to others. These 6 values, they're the foundation of every one of Arthur's businesses, from the Home Depot to the Atlanta Falcons, MLS's Atlanta United, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, PGA Tour Superstores, Mountain Sky and West Creek Ranches, and the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation. In our conversation today, we talk about how a values-based approach can transform companies, associates, customers, and communities. Arthur shares some really powerful stories that illustrate how these values are embedded inside of the culture and drive every decision. And we also dig into his own leadership journey, his highs and lows, and the legacy he wants to leave. Arthur's approach is a playbook for any leader who wants to build a culture that's rooted in values and powered by purpose. And if you're in customer service, which, by the way, aren't we all, then you'll get some really, really helpful takeaways. So let's jump in. Here's my conversation with Arthur Blank. All right, so Arthur, if I asked one of your associates to describe your leadership style, what do you think they would say?
They would probably say that very high values, supports all of his core values, leads by example, sets a very high standard. Probably would say that if he's not a perfectionist, he's probably close to it. He aspires for the best in everything, and everything to be done a certain way, with a certain level of concern for our values and what have you, and probably say that I'm a good listener, I'm thoughtful, I know what's going on in all of our businesses. I get a lot of comments like that from our associates sometimes. They think, that's amazing, you actually know all about that, because I read almost everything they send me, which is a lot, or share with me. I read it out of respect for them and out of respect for the businesses, et cetera. So I'm probably a lot more knowledgeable in a lot of our businesses than many people even may think. But I don't over influence. I think I let them do their jobs, give them the training, give them the orientation, and they go from there. And I respect that.
What would you say, Arthur, is a defining moment, maybe in your life, that has influenced the way that you show up as a leader?
That's a really good question. Think of just a single moment. I would think, in part, probably when Bernie and I got fired. Bernie, me and my co-founder at the Home Depot back in 1978. I had never been fired in my life, and when I called my wife, and we were living in Fullerton, California, in Orange County at the time, and I called her and told her, well, Bernie and I were just fired. She started laughing, and she wasn't. She laughed, but she just said, you got to be kidding. I said, no, I'm really not kidding. So I remember it was a rainy Friday afternoon, and it took me a couple hours to get home in the rain. By the time I got there, the LA Times had called the house, the Wall Street Journal had called the house. So by the time I walked in the door, she said, I guess you weren't kidding. I said, no, wasn't kidding. But there was a history there. It was a political situation primarily between my partner, Bernie, and the gentleman who was running the parent company at that time. But anyway, I think that was really a defining moment for me. I've thought about it over the years. It's a really good question, Molly, because when I lost my father, I was only 14 years old. And I didn't think of it that way as a defining moment, but it probably instilled in me a sense of urgency about, getting on with my life, getting on with things that somehow at some level in my brain, I said to myself, gee whiz, I lost my dad when I'm 44. Am I going to live to be 100? And my mother lived to be 4 months short of 100. Mm-hmm. But, losing my father at that early age, I think, probably produced a sense of urgency throughout my life. So, I've always been a believer, what you can do, today, you do today, you don't put off for tomorrow. So I think some of that probably subconsciously came from the loss of my dad.
And I love what you say in the book. You talk about people shouldn't feel like they're working for you. You talk about that they should feel like they're working with you. And I love some of the things, the walk in my shoes.
We're really blessed. And I would say to go back to, that started really the days of HD, because I would tell our associates when I left the company in 2001, we had 250,000 associates. And I would say to them in one form or fashion, depending on the context and the form, et cetera, basically, one of my messages was that, you're very lucky. We're very lucky to do what we do, because people go into the Home Depot stores and they either have a problem or they have a dream, one or the other. Problem, the toilet doesn't work, the sink is flush, is missing, whatever it may be, or I have a dream, I had a room on my house or remodel my kitchen or bathroom, whatever. And so we would, make people's problems go away and make their dreams come true. So I said, every day when you come to work, despite what happened at home, whatever it is, good or bad or indifferent, you're going to have a happy day at work. So how that translates now into all of our businesses, in the case of our starting out west with our guest ranches, our job is to make our guests happy when they come into work. Our job in our stadium is to make them feel, win or lose, whether it be Atlanta Falcons or Atlanta United, that they're welcome home, that they feel appreciated, they feel honored. It's certainly true in our PGA Tour Superstores. We're the number one golf retailer in the country today. They want to feel like we're interested, not in necessarily selling them everything, but really making sure they're fitted properly with clubs and clothing, whatever it may be. So what it does is that for all those associates I mentioned in all of these businesses, they all feel like they're being of service to somebody else. So it puts them in a happy place. It puts them in a place where they feel like, my job is to make other people happy, whether it be at guest ranching or in the stadium or Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, or our PGA Tour Superstore. So, I think that's a great position to be in. And people go to work, they feel like, I have a purpose today. I have a purpose today. It's not just making money. It's about making other human beings feel better about themselves and better about, each other at the end of the day. So I think that's a pretty special place to be.
Well, and purpose drives so many behaviors. It helps us recover from adversity. It does all those things.
Right.
This is a belief that you clearly hold to your heart. You talk about it in the book. It's inside of your values.
Yeah.
How have you pushed this down through the organization at scale, inside of multiple organizations? How have you done that? That's hard to do.
Well, that is, Molly, 100% right. It's very, very hard to do. I'll never forget a story, which I think it's in the book. After a couple of years, we started HD in 79, first stores here in Atlanta, as you might remember. And we went public in September of 81. And we were opening up 4 stores in South Florida at that time. And a gentleman came to visit me. His name was Joe Ellis, who happened to be a senior managing partner at Goldman Sachs and highly thought of on Wall Street, et cetera. And he came to have lunch with me. And one of the things he said during lunch, he said, I visited your stores in Atlanta. They're incredible. But one of the things, you're not going to be able to do is to be able to export your culture, your unique culture, which exists in all these stores in Atlanta, as you go to South Florida, and eventually if you expand, and obviously the company's international now with 2,200 stores in Canada, US, and Mexico. So I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and I went to see my partner, Bernie, and I sat down and I said, Joe Ellis was in to see me a couple of weeks ago, and he didn't ask my opinion on this. He just said, as a matter of fact, he said, you will not be able to maintain this unique culture, which drives all of this behavior, drives all of our associates and all of our relationships with the people we're serving. And I said, the only way, and he's right, accept that, the only way that we can do that if we make, in terms of our succession planning process, we actually look at every single person that's going to end up being a leader. It would be assistant store manager, department heads, regional people, presidents of divisions, whatever it may be. do they lead by valuing the culture and living the culture and being ambassadors for the culture? If they could do that, they're in line then for promotion. But if they didn't do that, however good they may be at doing their job as a technician, as an expense controller, as a merchandiser, whatever it may be, they weren't going to be promoted because they were not going to support the culture, which we knew was the most important arrow that we had in our quiver. So I think that fundamental belief, which we established then and now is built into all of our businesses, that nobody gets to lead that doesn't really not only understand, but more importantly, understand to live our culture. If they can't, it's not, there are 6 core values that we talk about all the time. It's not important that they be able to, let me tell you what 1 is, 2 is, 3 is. It's important they understand all 6 and they live all 6. If they do that, then we don't have to be concerned whether, myself or any of our senior executive teams are involved in every single decision. They'll make the right behavioral decisions because they understand what makes us work.
How are you measuring against those 6 core values? And you talk about them in an amazing way in the book, Good Company.
Yeah. It's very hard to measure. At the end of the day, you measure it because you see financial results. So I'll give you some examples of ways you can measure because, in your mind, you could give yourself all, in college, you all give us, I deserve an A on every paper. And the teacher said, nah, not so much. Maybe a B on this one, maybe a C on this other one, maybe an A on here. But so I'll give you an example. The NFL, they have a survey they do. There's 256 regular season games played in the NFL. Every single game, the NFL sends out people to each individual stadium, and they survey all the fans that attend on a whole variety of things. Everything from the, how do you leave, how do you come, fan experience out of the stadium, food and beverage, security, everything you can measure. And at the end of the year, they share a report card back to every team. So as an example, despite our losing record for the Falcons the last couple of years, which has not been great, but hopefully we'll get better the second half of this year, as we've seen the last 4 games. But they've told us that, the fans across the NFL say in terms of an in-stadium experience, in terms of how do we make people feel when they're in the stadium, we're graded number 1 out of 32 teams.
It's amazing.
We're graded number 1 out of 32 teams on food and beverage throughout all 32 teams. We're graded number 1 in terms of security, how people feel comfortable, secure, safe, in a safe place out of 32 teams. So in every one of our businesses, beyond the financial results that we internally see, there are ways that you can measure it. So I'll take our ranch as an example. We spend 0 money on marketing. The reason we spend 0 money on marketing for our guest ranch is that 96% of our guests, before they leave the ranch, they put a deposit down for the same week, same cabin, a year away. So, there's lots of ways you can measure, are we living these values? Just talking about them, most importantly, we're living them. And the answer is we are, and we have those measures in all of our businesses. So I think, you can put measures in and you look for those check marks of getting, enough A's that you feel like you're really getting the job done in terms of training. And you have to be committed to training. I know in the early days of Home Depot, when we really had no money, we lost half of our startup money in the first 6 months we were in business. Half of it was gone. But we never backed off the training because we understood that product knowledge, in this case, to the customers who were shopping in the HD stores, was terribly important. So we wanted to make sure people working electrical, plumbing, lumber, building materials, garden department, whatever it may be, they understood their products. So that was the value add. It wasn't just a product on the shelf at a price, but it was actually, you could talk to a Molly Fletcher who worked in the garden department who actually knew what she was talking about and she could really help you. So, well, that's great. Now I know what to do with this and this and this. So I think there's certain things you have to be committed to. And if you do, you can measure those results and see those results. It all ends up based on behavior and your response to opportunities to either do the right thing or do the wrong thing. So, my mother had an expression, you do the right things for the right reasons and you live with the consequences. And that drives a lot of my own thinking in a whole variety of ways. So, well,
and your mom had, by the way, I just have to note, a great name,
She did. Her name was Molly.
I know.
Molly Blank. Yes. She did have a great name. And, every single Molly I know, I'm not saying this because you're on your end of the phone here, but But every Molly I've known in my life has been a wonderful person. I'm probably biased. I have two golden retrievers, and one is Molly, and she's the better behaved of the two. So,
well, good. I'm on track.
Yeah, you are.
So, the other thing you talk about people, that you put people first, and that's one of the core values, right? And I love the story that you tell in Good Company about the stadium seating, that it all comes down to 2 inches. Can you share that story with our listeners?
Yeah, it's when we're designing the stadium, we wanted everything to be, the best or nothing. That happens to be the same slogan for Mercedes-Benz, just turns out that way. But that's been our core philosophy, is that you do the right things for the fans, the people you're serving, and it'll come back over the long haul. So they had about 20, 25 different seating arrangements. And so I brought in our senior team, about 20 of us. And I said, I believe like you buy seating for your home, a sofa, a chair, you want to go sit in it. I always think you got to go sit in something to see if it's really comfortable or not. So I said, we'll go sit in them. So we all went around the room. Everybody sat in the chair, liked this one, didn't like this one, liked one, didn't. Everybody had different opinions about different things. So I finally sat in this one chair along the way that clearly was a little more comfortable than the other ones. It was a little bigger, and it was a little more spacious, had a little more leg room, and wider by 2 inches than the standard in any NFL stadium at that time. So we're all finished. Everybody had a chance to express themselves. So they asked me, what do I think? Well, I think this chair that I just was sitting in, this one back here, row 4, middle row, is the most comfortable chair. And remember, there was silence in the room, not from our people, but from the professionals. And they said, well, that's the most expensive chair, which seat we have here. And you're going to end up with 65,000 of those. I said, that's fine. I said, it's the most comfortable. You asked me which one was the most comfortable. That's the most comfortable chair. The problem is that one is also 2 inches wider. I said, okay, it's 2 inches wider. They said, I don't think you understand the math of this. So we'll come back in a week and explain it to you. So they came back in a week with a whole set of drawings for the stadium with seats that were 2 inches wider. And it meant that the stadium, we had to add another 500,000 square feet of support and space for the building itself, because when you multiply 2 inches times 65,000, in this case, including suites and everything else, up to 75,000, it became a much bigger building. And so, this is outside people, not inside people. They said, well, you got to consider, you're going to be able to charge more for your tickets and this and that. And I said, I don't, we're not going to charge any more for our tickets. We're not doing anything like that. It's just a better seat. It's more comfortable. Our fans are showing us, tremendous commitment with their PSLs and buying season tickets. And probably more importantly, that their energy, their time, their passion, they're bringing their family. They're giving us everything that they can give us on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday night or a Monday or a Thursday, whatever it may be. The NFL is now playing on Tuesdays because of COVID sometimes. But, and I said, we need to find ways to say thank you to them and show our appreciation in a real way. And that was just an example. The food and beverage is another example. It's just a whole bunch of ways that I think that people who operate a business that's like this, with this kind of mentality, you find ways, you dig for ways to say thank you to the people that are supporting your business. And people appreciate these things. They see them, they know them. They may not talk about them all the time. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. But they see them, they know them. They know when you're walking in their footsteps, when you're thinking about them first. And all of our businesses, that's how we function. We always think about people we're serving first. And that gives the associates a great sense of pride too, because they know that, they have an ownership group or a management group that is will do everything they can for the associates to make sure they're properly trained so they can do the best possible job and then create the best environment for the people that we're serving.
I love what you mentioned about the concessions, because your concession prices are significantly lower, right? And that is such a positive thing for the fan experience, and it's very unique.
Significantly lower in our case means half. Yeah, when we were having a meeting on food and beverage with our management team, this is when the stadium was under construction at the Georgia Dome, where we were before. The state, basically the Congress Center, had control over the food concessions, so we didn't have a say in that. And they were fine, but they were normal like every other stadium. Food and beverage, I know, outside of winning games or matches, football, soccer, probably the second thing that's most important to people when they come, they want to be able to get good food, good prices, quality, quantity, et cetera. So they don't want to be taken advantage of. So typically in our industry, and this is across the United States, stadiums, arenas across the country, people, sadly, they treat the attendees as though they're captive. They're inside of prison walls. You're not getting out for 2 hours or 3 hours. And if you want something to eat or drink, you can have it, but you're going to pay whatever price that we're going to charge you for. So I said, we're not going to do that. We're going to have a version of what I call street pricing. They didn't like the word street pricing, so they called it fan-friendly pricing. But basically what it said was that our fans will never pay more than what they would pay on the outside for exactly the same food. I don't care if it's run by us or by any of the restaurateurs that we have in our building. So we have a lot of restaurateurs in our building and have, restaurants all over town, et cetera. And we told them the same thing. Several of them didn't quite understand it. And I said to them, actually, it's to your benefit. It's to our benefit because of who we're serving, but it's to your benefit for your brand. I said, people shouldn't feel like when they go to whatever place it may be outside the stadium, they pay X for the product. And then when they come to the stadium, it's exactly the same product, exactly the same serving, but they're paying twice as much. That's not right. So we made a decision at that meeting. We were going to cut food and beverage prices across the board by 50%, by half on everything. And I remember when I announced it to the media, I had several media say, well, Mr. Blank, Arthur, that sounds really good, but I'm sure you're only going to do that for the first, 3 games of the year. So no, we're going to do it for the entire, future. And well, have it maybe just the first year. No, I said, not going to be first year. It's going to be, well, you're definitely not going to do it for major events like the Final Four, the Super Bowl, college national game. And I said, we're doing it for everything. So the Super Bowl, as an example, we had exactly the same pricing. The NFL, has copied that now and pretty much requires any new stadium when they're operating the Super Bowl to sell food and beverage at very competitive prices. So, we've probably changed 120 stadiums, arenas, clubs in college ball, professional ball. And that was really what our goal was. I got 2 or 3 days after the first game, which happened to be on NBC, it was Sunday Night Football, and we were playing the Green Bay Packers, and we won the game at home. And I got a letter 3 days later from President Obama, and he said, I just wanted to congratulations on winning the game, et cetera, et cetera. But NBC had made a big deal about the food and beverage because they were amazed by it. So he said, I just really want to thank you for doing the right thing for all your fans and hopefully setting a trend across America where people can go to these events and not be taken advantage of. They feel like they can buy food and beverage, et cetera, at whatever prices they can get, out in the street, if you will, any place they went. So, that was the rationale behind it. And it's still very, very successful. Give you one point of reference so you understand it. So we reduced our price. We use an index of $1. If we reduced our price by 50%, that dollar became 50 cents. So on a per capita basis, the first year, that 50 cents became $1.20. So fans were not only spending up to the dollar, they spent 20% more. So they were coming and they were eating everything. The biggest problem we had at one point was how do we get rid of all the trash in the building? It was so much, and we figured that out, et cetera. But it was just an overflowing amount of food and beverage that was being consumed. And people felt like, this was a great experience and I feel appreciated. I feel like no one's taking advantage of me, and that's, I think, in all of our businesses, in every business, for any of your listeners, you want to make sure the people that you are serving feel like you're putting them first, not yourself first. And if you do that, there's a circle there. It'll come around, but you got to take care of the people you're serving first and your associates right alongside them, and then you'll get the good results.
Well, all that builds loyalty, right? And I think that's why we see more people in Atlanta running around with Falcons gear on, right? Because they have a little bit more money to spend on gear. Mm-hmm. So, one of the core values you talk about is listen and respond. And some of my favorite stories around your approach is when you bought the Falcons in 2002. And, you didn't go to the expected folks, right? You didn't go to the people that the world would say, well, that's who you go to. Yeah. So tell, who did you go to and sort of talk us through that a little bit? Yeah.
Well, it's a very interesting story, Molly, because what happened was that I was on the plane coming back from St. Louis. The transaction had been announced in 2001, but we didn't close till early February in 2002. So the players on the plane knew who I were, walked around the back of the plane. I said, look, I'm going to be a new owner. I used to play football in high school, so that means zero. It just means you just play football in high school. But tell me, how, as an owner, how can I help you? How can I make this better for you? And they all said the same thing to me. At that point, 60% of the building, or 40% of the building was empty, 60% was filled. Of the 60%, half of those fans were rooting for the other team, and half were rooting for us. So they said, we have no home field advantage at all. Zero. So can you help us, fill up the stadium? So came back, and one of my associates his name is Dick Sullivan, runs our golf business now, but came over from the Home Depot as executive vice president of marketing there and merchandising. And he joined me. And so we basically spent 6 months just asking, the people that weren't coming to the game. I said, just tell us. We didn't give them any opinions. The people inside the building, they all had opinions, but frankly, their opinions had already been played out and none of them had worked. So I said, can we just ask the fans, just ask them, give us 5 things or 6 things. Don't give us 600, but tell us 5, 6 things that would make a difference to you in terms of you supporting the team. So, one of the things they came back with was that, the prices are too high. There was not enough parking. There were 5 or 6 things. It wasn't a long list of things. So basically, we solved all for those 6 things, and we sold out every game starting in 2002 all the way through currently, other than 2007 when Michael Vick broke his leg. We had 3 games where we didn't sell out. But the point of that, one of the major points is that in terms of pricing. So one of the issues, the tickets were too high. So I called the commissioner at that time, Paul Tagliabue, who's a wonderful man, wonderful human being, smart as heck. Mm-hmm. And I said, Paul, what we want to do, we got to fill up the stadium. I said, and our players don't know if somebody's paying $300 for a ticket or $3 for a ticket. They don't really care. They just want Falcon voices in the building. So I said, for this year, for 2002, we're going to sell 20,000 seats at $10 a game or $100 for a season ticket. And I remember there was complete silence on the other end. And Paul was a brilliant attorney, so he did have a way with words. He knew, he's very articulate, very kind man. And finally he said to me, he said, we're going to tell you two things. He said, 1, you have the legal right to do that because you own the franchise. It's your franchise. Number 2, you're going to get hell from the other owners because you're shaking up the whole world of sports by doing that. Sure. Because there are other teams that had, similar situations. They weren't selling out. Therefore, they wouldn't cut their prices, et cetera. So we did it in 2 hours. We sold out all of the tickets that we had, 20,000 seats per game for the entire year were gone in 2 hours, and we filled up the stadium. And so that was an example where we just, responded to what the fans were telling us. We listened. Their major complaint was pricing was too expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So we said, okay, let's deal with that. And there were some other ones too we dealt with, but the most important one was pricing. So we dealt with that and the fans responded. So I used to tell people, this goes back to the days at HD, and Bernie would tell you the same thing. Guys were geniuses. How did you do it? I said, really? Did you watch the movie, The Wizard of Oz? Everybody said, oh, yeah, I watched the movie Wizard of Oz. They said, you remember there's a thing there called the Yellow Brick Road? You follow the Yellow Brick Road, it takes you to Oz, et cetera. I said, all we did really for all those years was that we listened to the people that were serving. We subordinated our thinking to their thinking. We never were smarter with them. We always said they were smarter than us. The people that were serving knew more about what they needed than what we thought they needed. And we just responded to that quickly, decisively, and constantly made adjustments in assortment of service levels or services or prices, whatever it may be. And so they responded by coming in and shopping with us in numbers that were incredible. So I do think, and this is true in all of our businesses today, all the ones I mentioned earlier, and I think really across America, I think if you really want to improve your business, spend much more time with the people that you're serving and ask them, how can I serve you better? We would, at Home Depot as an example, another example of this is that Bernie and I would stand outside the stores in Atlanta. We only had a handful of stores then. Any customer that walked out with a lot of stuff, we'd wave and say thank you and what have you. But we stopped the ones that walked out that had nothing, because the ones that had nothing we knew had come into the store for something. it was unusual for them to come in and just kind of walk around the aisle. Sometimes people did that, but usually they came in for something. If they're walking out with nothing, we wanted to know. So we'd ask her, we'd say, Molly, we'd say, hi, I'm Bernie Marcus, co-founder of the Home Depot of Arthur Blank. I understand you didn't find what you're looking for today. Could you share with us what it was? How can we get better, et cetera? And people, if they really felt like you really had a sincere interest in that, they would tell you. They'd say, well, you really want to know, I was in the plumbing department and the person there just didn't know what they were talking about. Mm-hmm. And I knew it, and I was afraid to buy the product, so I walked out. So that told us more product knowledge in that area. Or we didn't have the right supplier. In the early days, as we were, adjusting our mix and creating the mix to accommodate the market, they would tell us, well, in Atlanta, you need this. In South Florida, you need this. In Tampa, you need this. Or Orlando, you need this, whatever it may be in the earlier markets. And so we had to listen to that and just respond to it. So, it's not complicated, but you have to have humility. You have to have a real sense of humility and be willing to say to yourself, the people we're serving truly know better than I know in terms of what they're looking for. I think that's true. I think it's true in every business. I don't think there's any exceptions to it.
Sure. Well, humility and curiosity, right? You were inherently curious.
Right.
Which is huge.
Right.
Have you made your goals yet for 2021? Our New Year's resolutions, they're all about growth. So if you're looking for ways to grow both personally and professionally, check out my group coaching program, Game Changer Leadership Huddles. The best gift you can give yourself is to invest in you, because we can't give from an empty cup. Sign up today at mollyfletcher.com/leadership-huddles. Or check this out, gift a membership to someone who matters to you. Again, that's mollyfletcher.com/leadership-huddles. Tell me this, Arthur, what's a leadership mistake maybe that you've made, and what would you now, in sort of looking in the rearview mirror, have done differently?
Yeah. Well, one that sticks to mind, and we talk about a little bit in the book, is we made an acquisition, a company called Bowater. When we didn't have a lot of stores, we had probably 25, maybe 30 stores. So now we're up to 2,200. So it's, the company was really small. And we acquired nine existing stores. There was 6 in Dallas. There was one in Shreveport, one in Baton Rouge, and one in Mobile. And what we try to do is that, they were doing a little bit of volume, not much, same size stores as ours, but they were doing probably a quarter of the volume that we were doing per store. So we knew that, the merchandise mix was wrong, the training was wrong, et cetera. But we try to keep the stores open and change the training and change the merchandise mix in the store. And that's a little bit like trying to change tires on a car going 30 miles an hour. It's very painful. So we ended up, closing the stores then for about, 3 months and re-merchandising them, training everybody, making sure they understood, our values, the way we want to treat our customers, et cetera, and how we treat each other, associates. And then we reopened it, and the stores were very successful since then. So, that was a lesson. It does take time. I would say a second lesson, which maybe is really important, Molly, I think, for all of your listeners, and one that we realized when we went to California. The first store was in Southern California, in the general LA area, and it was a good location. So I said, we're probably going to hire about 400 people for this first store, in that store, and we'll take out one of our existing store managers and take out our assistant managers and some department heads. So it was a group of about 15 to 20 people, and we took them out there, and we realized store opened up, and then we had 400 people there, but they weren't properly trained. So we realized at that point, and we talk about this in the book a little bit, Molly, is a chapter about the squeaky wheels on the wagon. So it's all right for the wheels to rattle a little bit, but it's not all right if you push them where they start falling off, because that obviously not going anyplace. So we had pushed our training, I think, to the edge and over the edge. So we realized at that point, this cultural training, which we all acknowledged was, the difference between us and everybody else, and the implementation of the strategies behind that, we just couldn't do it with that fewer people. So every other store after that we opened up, we moved 30 to 40 people. So the pyramid, the ratio of new hires to the experienced people was much lower. So it made it a lot easier for our stores to open up and feel like, they were legitimate Home Depot stores. And so, that kind of, we went back to the board. I remember this meeting, Bernie and I went back to the board and we said, look, we can physically open up stores, at the rate of, and we were opening up stores at 200 stores a year, a store every day and a half. Jeez. And we could do that, but we're not going to have the level of trained associate on the floor that we've built and represents the best of us now. So we put a limit on ourselves. We were not going to grow faster than 25% a year. And so, I had another experience, a personal one that reinforced that just personally for me. When my mother was younger, she was in a hospital in Southern California before she moved to Atlanta. And I remember going in, she was getting a blood transfusion, and the doctor happened to be there, but my mother had very small veins. The transfusion was taking quite a bit of time. It was pretty painful for her. And so I said to the doctor, well, can't you do this transfusion any quicker so she could get it over with? He said, no, we can't. He said, because the body can only take blood at a certain rate, can only take new blood at a certain rate. So that notion of, that we all have limits in terms of how quickly we can catalyze change, absorb it and deal with it, both from a medical standpoint and personally, and, physically and work, et cetera, really was, it's another example of how it was really, reinforced to me. So the sense of not diluting ourselves and having a sense of pace about how quickly we could grow, albeit it was obviously very quickly because we grew at 45% a year for 23 years, the years that I was there per year. But that's compounded sales growth. We had to do it in a way that we wouldn't kill the patient. We wouldn't kill the associates that were trying to give service to all these people. So I think that was one of the important lessons as well along the way.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, Arthur, I've always admired about you, I mean, there's a long list, of course, is you don't shy away from difficult conversations, right? You are not afraid to tackle tough challenges. I mean, you've done it over and over again. I mean, you talk about get comfortable getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
How do you make that a part of your culture? And what advice do you have for people now? I mean, a lot of people are going through a lot of challenges, a lot of change.
Yeah.
What's your mindset when you embark on these moments?
Well, I think, and I've always done this, sometimes our communications group, they get a little bit nervous about it. I said, I'll take any question. It doesn't make a difference. I don't want to be prepared. They don't have to tell me to answer what the questions are. If I can't answer the question, then there's something wrong with me. So people can ask whatever they want to ask. And I think I have to be prepared as a business leader to respond to whatever people are asking about, So I've always enjoyed that, particularly if I'm dealing with a reporter or somebody doing an interview that's actually very thoughtful and have done their homework and they do have a question which is on the minds of a lot of people, but they're a little nervous to ask. Don't be nervous. Ask whatever you want to ask. So I think that's, we should be able to respond to, whatever is put in front of us. And I think that level, once you do that, I think that level of trust with the people that you're talking to or dealing with is very important. So for instance, in a public company, HD as an example, one of the reasons our shareholders did so well for 23 years that I was there with Bernie and continue to do incredibly well now with Frank Blake and Craig Manier and Ted Decker now, is that, the level of trust we had with the shareholder community was very, very high. So when we had, my own philosophy always is that, bad news should travel quicker than good news. So when we had something to share with the investor community, they didn't have to pull it out of us. They didn't have to do their own research. They didn't have to dig around and find it buried on the 5th page of a financial statement in a small print or something. We would tell them. I said, look, we've gone to this market. If there's a market, it's taking us a little long to stabilize. We can't get enough real estate. We're working on it. We'll have it another year or two, but it's going to take us a little longer to have the penetration. I mean, we would tell them that. We wouldn't wait for them to find it. So the level of trust that was established between us and the shareholder community was very, very high. And that gave them the confidence they wouldn't, whatever we told them, they could believe. They could take it to the bank. They could support the stock. They could, sell it to their investors, et cetera, because they knew that there was not going to be any hidden surprises. I think trust establishment is so critical in every area of life.
Sure. Well, and yeah, I always joke and say, if you want a problem to get really good, just put it over here in a petri dish and leave it alone.
Yeah.
And it'll get amazing. It'll get amazing.
Yeah.
Arthur, what motivates you, and has what motivates you changed at all over the years?
Yeah, I think, Molly, and you could reflect on that yourself, because you've had a very long, successful career. But I think as I've gotten older, I think I realize more. I look at my life in terms of the purpose of life and why are we here. So is it just to satisfy myself, satisfy my immediate family, my circle of love, people in that circle? But an equal part of, I think, is that how do I serve humanity? How do I make a difference in other people's lives, both in our businesses, associates who are serving in all of our businesses, but beyond that, we are brother's keeper, caring about community, caring about others, caring about those that are less advantaged than we are. Not doing it for them, but helping people to do the best they can do and give them an opportunity to have, the best lives they can have a level playing field, if you will, and give them a shot at all the dreams that we all have in life. So that's really what a lot of my life is now, working with my foundation, and I'm blessed having my children all involved in that work now as well, particularly my older kids. My young kids are coming along, and they're getting involved too. And that makes me incredibly proud of them and of myself and of their mothers, who have been, wonderful stabilizing forces in their lives. So, I think you realize as you get older, that life has a bigger purpose than just going through the stages of life. You can impact lots of people in very positive ways throughout your life. And that becomes a real blessing, not only to them, but maybe even more so to you. You feel that when you make a difference in somebody's life. And so I try to think about that almost every day. How am I making a difference in other people's lives? I had an opportunity to speak to President Carter. Wow. And, we were talking about, he was kind enough to write the foreword to the book, Good Company. And I asked him, what are you doing? How are you feeling? What are you doing? How's Rosalind? We're fine. We get up every day. We're doing something. We're trying to make a difference, still giving back, trying to find a way to help still run the Carter Center, be involved in global health and global peace and poverty. And he said to me the same thing. It's exactly what you're doing. You're 78, I guess I am. Yeah. And if I can remember, 78, he said, that's the same thing that you're doing. And he's right. That's what gives my life, purpose. And I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten more appreciation of that.
It's about the people you serve. You've been amazingly generous with your time. Can I fire some quick rapid fire questions to you and then we wrap it up?
Sure.
Cool?
Yeah.
So are you an introvert or extrovert?
I would say an introvert by nature.
A book you recommend to other leaders?
So many good ones.
Good Company, I know we got.
Well, Beyond Good Company. There's a book I read several years ago. It was written by Richard Louv. It was called The Last Child in the Woods. And I'd highly recommend that because it really talks to getting kids, outside, away from everything organized, everything structured, and part of nature, part of connecting with each other. We need to build, in my opinion, we have much greater connectivity than we've ever had in our lives, but we have less neighborhoods than we've ever had in our lives. And I think this notion of being a neighbor, being outside, being connected to each other physically, emotionally, in a variety of ways is very important. So his book was a wonderful book for me.
What's one thing you wish you knew earlier about leadership that you think might have saved you some time and energy?
I think the whole notion of the inverted pyramid, which they still use today at Home Depot. Go to the Shell's meeting, see our culture wheel up on their wall, and you see inverted pyramid up on the wall. And the inverted pyramid puts the people you're serving on top, and then right below them are the frontline associates, and then at the bottom is the servant leader. In this case, for many years it was me and Bernie, and now it's Ted Decker and Craig Manier. That notion of being of service to others and listening and being able to follow, that yellow brick road of what people are really telling you they want and need is really important.
The show's called Game Changers. Who's a game changer, or what's a game changer that has inspired you in your life, and why?
I think my partner at Home Depot, Bernie Marcus, certainly inspired me. I mean, he had a vision for a lot of things that we co-shared and co-developed with each other. So that was very important to me. I think, one of the guys even more currently than that is Bill Gates, because I think Bill, in my opinion, has taken the genius that he obviously had on the business front and applied it now, within the Gates Foundation. He and his wife Melinda together, which is a beautiful thing to do it together as a couple. But they're engaged in the heaviest problems that the world has, and he's making a difference in those areas. He enjoys life, and he enjoys life with his daughter and what have you, and his family. But he's finding ways to provide that same energy, that same thinking, that same how do I make things better? But in this case, not just a product, but things in the world for many other people. How do I flatten the poverty curve? How do I flatten the curve dealing with the lack of equality where it may exist? So I really admire that. And I think his work, during this whole COVID situation, working with the companies on the vaccines and these manufacturing plants, which are, we have these two vaccines which have now been announced in the last 2 weeks. Well, what people forget is that in the normal course of things is that it would take then years to build a manufacturing plant. But because of Bill Gates and a group that he was involved in, they built 5 manufacturing plants all over the world while the vaccine was being developed, 2 or 3 of which they will never be able to use. But they knew that when they started. But they can go to work immediately in producing millions and millions and millions of vaccines within a month. Because they have those facilities now. Mm-hmm. And so I think that kind of commitment to, the human race, that kind of commitment to the planet is something I really admire.
Well, like you, he's given back to the world in amazing ways. And,
yes, I agree, Molly.
Arthur, thank you. And maybe I'll see you.
Yeah, when you see me out at Cherokee again, come over and say hi.
I'll see you out there, and I absolutely will.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Talk about a brilliant business mind and someone who is truly making an impact. Here are 3 of my favorite takeaways from our conversation. Number 1, be humble and curious. I think these are 2 important leadership traits that really jumped out to me in this conversation. Arthur's humility matched with his curiosity. That's something that we can all control as leaders, approaching conversations and challenges with humility and with curiosity. Number 2, I love this. It's all about 2 inches. My favorite story Arthur told was the story of the seating at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. What a powerful example of putting the customer first. As Arthur says, dig into ways to say thanks to the people who support your business. Number 3, know your why. Look at life in terms of your purpose. Arthur asks himself this every day. This is a powerful question. How do I serve humanity? Think every day about how are you making a difference in someone else's life. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.